But as Lars says, my name's Richard. I'm the CEO of IRLAB, and we're all about transforming the lives of patients living with Parkinson's disease. So, of course, I should draw your attention to the usual disclaimers and forward-looking statements. And maybe I should start off with just a summary. Why IRLAB? What's so exciting about IRLAB? Well, first of all, of course, as you probably remember, IRLAB is built on some groundbreaking, pioneering research in Gothenburg by Professor Arvid Carlsson, for which he was awarded the Nobel Prize in the year 2000. And he actually discovered how the brain works, neurotransmission, and discovered dopamine, and then later levodopa, which is the drug used to treat Parkinson's disease. So the knowledge that we have within IRLAB is really quite deep and profound and based on decades of research. Now, of course, we have refined that so that we can really focus on the broad range of symptoms that Parkinson's patients suffer with, and that's the basis of our strategy. I think, and when I was doing my due diligence as I was considering joining IRLAB, I think the deal with Ipsen is really strong validation. Technical validation, clinical validation, commercial validation, that what we're doing really, really works, and it really, really has potential. Of course, there's still risks. We shouldn't forget that. This is a high risk, high reward, very worthwhile business. We have retained 4 unencumbered assets, which have great potential for turning into blockbusters themselves and also helping IRLAB form itself into a real, very valuable pharmaceutical company. And as an organisation, great competence that I mentioned earlier, lots of experience, listed on the Nasdaq, and quite a strong cash position. So all in all, I think IRLAB is very well positioned, and I probably use this slide and refer to this quite often. Poised for success, that's the other thing. Many of it fell out of the last slide. Although there's been some challenges in CNS drug discovery and development in recent decades, yesterday was an absolute whooper day, really, with the BioArctic results. My opinion is that we're poised for great transformation in CNS drug discovery and development, really based on technology, big data, data mining, in the same way as immuno-oncology evolved a decade ago. Our discovery platform is really well positioned to deliver that. I've already mentioned we have 4 unencumbered assets that are really set for some very significant news flow in the coming months. Mesdopetam, data at the end of the year. Pirepemat, data at the end of next year. 2 preclinical assets to enter the clinic next year, and a very exciting discovery project that hopefully we can talk more about at the end of the year or early next year. As you may know, we've really strengthened the management team, I hope, with the addition of myself, so that Nicholas can focus his efforts on delivering our R&D promises, and I can be out here talking to the shareholders, talking to the stock market, talking to pharma, and also helping refine our strategy going forward. So we really are building from a position of strength. Next slide. Yes. So Parkinson's disease, you're probably familiar with it. We've all come across this in our lives. And I was quite surprised when I started my diligence to go back and understand that it remains a neurodegenerative disease without cure. 9 million patients estimated worldwide at the moment, probably going to double in the next decade. The standard of care has also not really evolved in the 30+ years since I was at university. Levodopa, which has got terrible complications. You have to take it 6-8 times a day, and the benefits wear off after time. And the 2 most significant consequences of taking levodopa are the so-called levodopa-induced dyskinesias and increased falls and instability, postural instability. And they're our 2 lead programs. So let's just talk about the lead program first of all, Mesdopetam, for levodopa-induced dyskinesia. I know this can be complicated, so I'll try and explain it as I understood it when I first tried to unpick it. When a Parkinson patient wakes in the morning, they're greeted with muscle stiffness and rigidity. They can't move. Their brain is not allowing them to move. They take this great drug called levodopa, and after a while it starts to work, and they have normal motor function. They can move and control their muscles. But after a while, you get excessive movement and tremor caused by the levodopa. And that becomes quite troublesome for patients. They can't function, they can't work. This so-called levodopa-induced dyskinesia. So you have off time when they wake up. You have good on time when the levodopa is working. And you have bad on time when they have this excessive kinesia. Mesdopetam will increase the good on time by reducing the bad on time. It's kind of quite simple when you boil it down to that. So if we can improve that, we can improve the quality of life for patients quite significantly. More than 1 million patients worldwide. Here we are. The second program, pirepemat. Of course, we can understand this. As the disease progresses, they lose postural stability, they lose motor function, the patients lose balance, and they fall. Clearly, loss of balance and fall gives great insecurity both for the patients and for their caregivers. And in the event that a patient over 60 falls and is hospitalized, there's a significant hospital cost for that, $30,000. So if we can improve postural stability and reduce the number of falls, we really have got a great breakthrough here. And we're the first company in the world to be addressing this. More than 2 million patients, we think, worldwide. But that's only part of the story for people living with Parkinson's disease. The motor functions, dyskinesias, postural instability and falling, really, really limiting to their quality of life. But you can see here, patients live with Parkinson's disease for 20 years or more very often. It's the non-motor symptoms of Parkinson's disease that are also quite a problem. Cognitive function, memory, decision-making, speech, hallucinations, apathy are really limiting factors of having Parkinson's disease. And our preclinical programs, 942 and 757, are specifically designed to address these non-motor symptoms in Parkinson's patients. And the very bottom here, our 003 discovery program, we think will be a one-a-day levodopa replacement without these troublesome complications. So that has great potential. It's too early to talk too much about it, but we're working hard on delivering that. So it's a pipeline of drug candidates from late stage, end of phase 2B, ongoing phase 2B, and some assets that are about to enter the clinic that will serve the patient through this 20-year journey. And that's why I say with so much confidence, it's got great blockbuster potential individually and as a business itself. So Mesdopetam, as many of you know, I think, this has now been acquired by Lipson, and subject to favourable results that we hopefully can report out at the end of the year, we hope that they will be able to take this forward into phase 3 and commercialise it. It's specifically designed to address LIDs, levodopa-induced dyskinesia. How does it work? Well, dopamine affects these two receptors, D1 and D2, and respectively, they control movement and resistance of movement. When you haven't got enough dopamine, you actually get an upregulation of D3 to try and control this movement. Mesdopetam works by inhibiting that D3 and therefore stopping the dyskinesia. The mechanism sounds easy when I stand here and talk about it. I'm representing a decade of work by brilliant people boiled down to a few sentences, but it really is quite a breakthrough. What does good look like? What would be a good result? I think that's something that I've been asked quite often. Well, we know from our KOLs, from treating patients, and from talking to patient groups that 1 extra hour a day of good on would be a really, really good result. There are some dirty old drugs like amantadine that are on the market that could possibly give 1.5 hours of additional good on time a day with consequences with side effects. In our phase 2A study, we reported 2.8 hours of good on. I'm not saying that 2.8 hours is the target. I'm saying that anything more than 1 would be good, more than 1.5 would be very, very good, and we think we've got a shot of being even greater than that. But the decision is more complicated than just a simple number because it's bound up with all sorts of statistics and other factors. So we're looking forward to reporting this at the end of the year. A few dimensions on the study, 154 patients, it's fully recruited, Europe, Israel, and North America, testing three dose levels, powered so that we can read out the result. Determined by patient diaries. This was in agreement with the regulators, if you know. So they agreed with us, and this has become the norm, that the patient record keeping is the best way of monitoring good on and bad on time, rather than any other complicated method. So that's our key way of developing this. And again, Ipsen agree with that, and so do their KOLs and advisory committees. You possibly remember this when it was announced about a year ago. Quite a significant transaction, 363 million plus royalties, so quite a significant deal. Most important, of course, is their passion for taking this forward. And I can tell you, having spoken with them and worked with them for a few months now, they're as motivated about taking this forward as we are. Our second program, pirepemat, designed to increase balance and reduce falls, an unencumbered asset. I've already shown you this image. Cognitive decline, impaired balance, fall, great stress for the patients and for their caregivers, not to mention the economic burden for the healthcare providers. Works in a completely different way. Our ISP discovery engine has understood that it's the dopamine and the noradrenaline in the frontal cortex that causes this loss of balance and instability. And pirepemat is specifically designed to improve that functionality, the synaptic activity here. Again, credit to the research that I boiled down to a few bullet points in a presentation, but this really is groundbreaking research and drug discovery. The clinical path is quite straightforward. Confirm it's safe in healthy volunteers, take it into some patient populations, confirm that it works, and now go into a larger patient population and really see if we can get some statistical power to see whether we can go forward into phase 3. And that's where we are right now. We're looking at reduction in falls frequency as the primary endpoint, but we can also see that there are other symptoms of Parkinson's disease that we can address with pirepemat, in particular apathy. But we'll come back to that if and when we get signals, clinical signals that support that. Why did we want to go forward? Well, as I mentioned before, the falls is governed by so-called executive function in the frontal cortex, quite different to the other parts of Parkinson's disease. And these features of Parkinson's disease are not really addressed by levodopa-carbidopa combination that patients normally take. Our first set of data here on the top left really confirms that pirepemat works in this region, not in the classical areas of levodopa. And what does that mean in terms of patient outcomes? Well, 35% improvement in balance, 54% reduction in falls, 70% reduction in apathy, and an 80% reduction in caregiver stress. Now, these other parameters are really valuable parameters in terms of how would we use the drug, who would benefit from it, what would be the propensity for a prescriber to actually prescribe it to a patient. Not only would it improve the quality of life for the patient, but also for their caregivers, which I think is really valuable. Study design, as ongoing study now, 165 patients testing 2 dose levels in a blinded placebo-controlled study, really being exactly the same, data being recorded by patient-recorded outcomes in a falls diary. In order to come onto the trial, patients must have a known falls frequency, 2 falls per week. We'll test the drug for 12 weeks. If that fall frequency decreases, then we'll claim a success. We can see that in our 2A study, that falls frequency reduced by a half. Anything more than 20-25% reduction in falls frequency would be a great benefit for patients and their caregivers. Our preclinical programs. Well, we don't normally talk too much about preclinical programs in these forums because until they actually pass that preclinical evaluation, safety, toxicology, manufacturing, and the regulatory clearance, they're still an experiment. Once they move into clinical research, then they become a development project, and we can really see light at the end of the tunnel. So we have 2 programs that are in this late stage preclinical and the research program 003. 942, to improve cognitive function. Cognitive function, memory, perception, attention to detail, reasoning, decision making, really important features, not just relevant to Parkinson's disease, but we're focusing our efforts on Parkinson's disease because it's a defined patient group. We can identify when the patients get to that stage and we can see an improvement. We can really do this clinical trial in what otherwise would be a massive indication. Similar thing, disruption of frontal circuits. We understand how this problem originates from understanding a lot about the way in which the brain works, the brain pharmacology, and then with engineered molecules that specifically work for that. I was just reviewing a publication that we're submitting, which talks about how we tune our algorithms to get the desired feature that we want when we're using our ISP engine. It really is a very powerful and potentially disruptive research tool. Current status of this program, preclinical proof of concept. It's been published. We're now developing the molecule in contract manufacturer. We're going through preclinical tox studies, preparing to submit for regulatory clearance during next year and start the phase 1 studies. Our second program, apathy, another very, very well-defined non-motor symptom of Parkinson's disease. The loss of initiative, interest, emotional expression, responsiveness. I think we all recognize this with older patients, particularly ones with Parkinson's disease, they become quite apathetic. It's a much broader indication than Parkinson's disease, but it's clearly defined in those patients on that patient journey. Again, more than 10 million people we recognize are affected with this worldwide, and vast majority of patients with CNS disorders. We're focusing this on Parkinson's disease in the first instance. Exactly the same stage. Preclinical proof of concept has clearly been defined. We're now manufacturing the molecule, we're taking it through the preclinical toxicology, and we hope to enter the clinic next year. Same clinical development path as for pirepemat and for Mesdopetam, confirm safety in healthy volunteers, then move into a patient population, and then scale it to get a statistical clinical proof of concept. The 003 program is really exciting. I encourage you to keep an eye on this as we report out over the coming months and years. If we can find a 1-a-day levodopa replacement without the complications, this could be transformative for Parkinson's patients. It's still in the research stage. We have some very encouraging results, and we'll bring some news out by the end of the year. But you can really imagine, if you look at the red line, that's how the that's the implications of taking levodopa. It has a short half-life, and you move into excessive response, no response, excessive response, no response during the day. You titrate the dose, you have the neurodegeneration, it gets worse. It's a constant balance. 003 program, the green line, is aimed at giving a constant dopamine or dopaminergic response within the brain throughout the day. All of this is come out of our research engine. And lots of companies claim to have disruptive technology, have a platform technology. When I investigated this, it really did blow me away. It's a huge database that's been accumulated over decades of work in Gothenburg, where they've evaluated and mapped thousands, I'd say 1,400, different CNS drugs in exactly the same way, monitoring and observing how they affect animals and rats in specific experiments, and then doing deep analysis to understand the gene expression when they take that drug and how that changes, and how the neuropharmacology changes when they give the drug. This is a vast database. And then we use machine learning to interrogate the database to advise what the molecules should do. We then make molecules in Gothenburg, test them in animals the next week, get the data, put it back in the database, do this iterative process through machine learning, a little bit more of this, a little bit less of that, make the new molecule, test it again. This is a very, very rapid and very informed way of developing drugs. There's far less serendipity here than there would normally be in developing new drugs. Proven advantages? Well, I guess one that I really, really liked was the fact that when we take our molecules to the World Health Organization and ask them for a name, a so-called INN, they say, this doesn't look like anything else. We say, well, no, it's not like anything else. We've invented it. This is completely new. And they have to come up with a whole new nomenclature or STEM name for our compounds. I think nonetheless, that confirms how unique our molecules are. And not surprisingly, we then have very strong intellectual property rights and patents. So this is a really powerful research tool that we continue to use. So in summary, a very rich pipeline. The lead program is Mesdopetam, licensed to Ipsen, strong validation. Pirepemat, phase 2b study, data at the end of 2023, unencumbered asset. 2 preclinical assets, one for cognitive impairment, another one for apathy, will enter the clinic next year, all of which have great blockbuster potential. And the 003 program could be a complete home run if indeed we get it out of the research stage and into the development stage. So watch this space. Not surprisingly, there's a lot of news flow, an awful lot of activities here. This is almost a checklist for us and a checklist for you. What are we doing? Are we delivering on our promises? Are we making solid progress going forward? So we'll keep building on this and going forward. Clearly, we've got operational milestones at the top there, and we're trying to communicate as much as we possibly can with commercial and publication and communication milestones at the bottom there. So we'll keep expanding on this and finding a better way to let you know what we're doing, when we're doing it, and where you can find out more. So, solid foundation, decades of work that have gone into this. I summarize it in a few moments, but a really, really solid foundation. We're now in the building phase. Assets in the clinic, being licensed, being partnered, going through the early clinical development into late stage development, validation with Ipsen, and a whole suite of unencumbered assets that we can take forward ourselves, release an awful lot of value, and at the same time take them forward for patient benefit. And we can now start to think about commercialization. It's a little bit early for us, but nonetheless, Ipsen, for example, are really focused on commercialization. How would they commercialize it? What would the positioning be, etc.? And then it becomes really, really exciting when these drugs enter the clinic, they start being prescribed to patients, we have revenue and royalties. We have some analyst coverage. You've possibly seen it. It's available and accessible. If you can't get through to these people, then let me know and we can help. You can certainly learn more from our analysts. And that's it from me. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah.
Good enough?
That was quick.
Okay.
With all the text. I think, I mean, IRLAB, this is something to digest. But I know you will be making the video from today available on your website.
Of course, yeah.
It's also at prohearings.com. And do you also make available the slide deck?
Sure. These slides are not original for today. I've used these slides over the last few months already, so there's nothing original for here today, so you can go back and look at them. These slides can be on our website.
Yeah,
Of course they can.
that's great because, I mean, this is
Sure.
advanced, fantastic.
Yeah.
It would be great for people with Parkinson's. And to start there, let's see if I get this right. 7 million people in the world is diagnosed with Parkinson's now, probably more in reality, and it will double over next 15, 20 years.
Sure, 9 million. And all the forecasts I've read suggest that it will double in the next decade and maybe even more than that by 2040. So yeah, a vast number of patients are suffering with this. And of course it's a consequence of the fact that we are living longer. Neurodegeneration continues, so yes. Yeah. So it's a very, very big patient population.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that I really
Aging population, that's expensive.
Oh, indeed. Oh, yeah, sure. That's a whole other conference, though, isn't it? How we're going to fund healthcare.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing that I'm a pharmacist. Yeah, I grew up medicinal chemistry, so I'm comfortable in a laboratory. This is good old-fashioned medicinal chemistry. A one-a-day pill. You take it twice a day, maybe. Nothing is going to surpass that. It's just the most straightforward way of treating the disease and managing a patient in the community as well as in the hospital. Yeah. So that I think is really valuable, and the fact that it's engineered so precisely with this deep understanding, I think really gives value to the proposition. It's not a complicated macromolecule that somehow needs to be infused somewhere and outpatient hospital setting for the patient to get the drugs. Once this is approved, the patient will just get a month's supply, 3 months supply, and just take it once a day or twice a day, and hopefully they'll continue to see the benefits. And that's, of course, what we want. Just the same as we manage, blood pressure or any other sort of chronic condition that evolves with time.
Yeah. So it's what I saw is when you're diagnosed with Parkinson, you die on average 7 to 15 years later, but not from Parkinson's. No. But that could be like a Putin critical oligarch from a fall, or something else, and you help make it something you can live with, like HIV back in the days.
For example, it is a chronic condition, but the drugs that we have for treating the evolving symptoms are not very effective. So the quality of life gets worse and worse and worse. But we know that levodopa works very well, but you can't make it work well in the long because you continue to have this neurodegeneration. So if we can continue to see the benefit from levodopa for longer and longer, or better still, we could have a replacement for levodopa that works for the whole day without these complications, then we really have got something that is quite transformative for patients. And you're right, patients often do not die of Parkinson's disease. They might get cancer, they might have a heart attack, they might die on the golf course, who knows, but they don't often die of Parkinson's disease. If they have a fall, we all know this, of course, if elderly people have a fall and they fracture their hip, the life expectancy after a hip fracture for an 80-year-old is really quite low. So, 45. Yeah. So if we could reduce that, then we can, provide, greater longevity for patients in such conditions. Yeah.
So, if we fast forward 20 years, and first off, you succeed. You put Mesdopetam on the market. Is it called
pirepemat?
Pirepemat on the market as well.
Yep.
And then you put P003 on the market, and the need for those to go away.
Well, maybe. We just don't know, do we? That's the thing is, you've still got this neurodegeneration, and we've still got the complications of that. So maybe we do, maybe we don't. These are things that you don't know. The other thing to be realistic, of course, is that whilst we have big ambitions for 003 program, and it can penetrate the market, it won't take the whole market. Of course it won't. Hopefully it'll be a very high-priced medicine, maybe only for first world countries. There'll be a lot of patients worldwide who won't be able to get 003 just because of the pricing.
You mean levodopa will live on?
Levodopa will carry on, of course it will, yes. And of course many healthcare providers will still want to be given levodopa, which is pretty cheap, but then they'll manage the complications in the future. In just the same, you mentioned HIV, in just the same way as acyclovir is now generic, but then you have the later iterations of antivirals they add in as the disease progresses during that disease cycle as well.
So if we leave for for the investor's own research, all your research and all your new tryouts and drugs, and we focus on the lowest and ripest hanging fruit. First up there is Mesdopetam, and that's sold to Ipsen, and it's right now is the late stage phase 2B, and that's 160 patients.
154 patients have been included in the study. Last patient was randomized a few weeks ago. We know that they have to be on the study for 12 weeks, so we can start the clock. So we know when the last patients have come off the study. Then we need to clean the data, make sure that there's no errors in the clinical database, run the statistical analysis plan, and hey presto, we should have headline data around the end of the year. You know, the end of the year is a busy time, but that's you can see how it would all click into place then.
But that's I should have known this, but this is a double-blind, external.
Sure.
This is not handled with IRLAB in Gothenburg.
Oh no, we're managing it. We're managing the study. We started the study a few years ago. We presented it to a number of industry players. Ipsen were quite excited about it. Said, "Hey, can we get in?" And we said, "Well, we're still doing the trial." They said, "Well, let us into the data room. Let's do our due diligence." They liked what they saw. It's still blinded. They don't know the result either. Yeah. And they said, "Okay, well, we'll take a license now, and hope that it will come good." They think the probability of it coming good as high as we do. And they're working. We're working with us. I think we announced a few weeks ago they've actually initiated some pharmacokinetics, drug-drug interaction type studies at their own cost and their own initiative, in preparation for a phase 3. We don't know that they'll do the phase 3, but they don't want to go stop start with parallel activities. They want to run things in series, so they don't waste any time.
Yeah. The Ipsen deal is a big feather in the hat for IRLAB. Sure. It's widely considered to be one of the best deals made at that stage from the life science pharma company in Sweden. I also know that...
That's why I said, for me, because I need to do quite a lot of due diligence in joining the company, for me that was great validation. They had experts and external advisors looking in the data room, interrogating everything. They confirmed that the drug discovery process was robust, that the molecule looked clean, the early clinical signals were robust and viable, and the commercial opportunity remained. So they ticked all the boxes and then put money on the table and a future commitment. Not just the commitment to us, but also the commitment to continue the development and to commercialize it, which often is greater than the amount of money they pay to the originator. So this was a really big validation.
Yeah. And for IRLAB, you're responsible, but when this 154 patient phase 2B Mesdopetam study is concluded, the bird flies away, and it's the Ipsen decision.
That's right.
To take it to phase 3.
That's exactly right.
Or they could also kill it. That's not your choice.
That's not our decision. Nope. It's not our choice. And they say they also have the option for all other potential indications that Mesdopetam could follow. Yeah. We saw a very encouraging signal in the phase 2A study for psychosis in Parkinson's patients. That's a major indication. And there's only one drug approved on the market for that, which is not a very nice drug actually. So that's great potential.
And the Mesdopetam for psychosis, that's the property of Ipsen as well?
That's the property of Ipsen as well.
Yeah.
So they could also take that forward. Yeah.
Okay, and also that's their decision and their cost from now.
Oh, for sure. Oh, absolutely. Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay. No. So I mean, they've taken the license to develop and commercialize this in all indications and all jurisdictions.
Yeah. When I talked to Richard on the telephone, I tried to squeeze an answer from Richard if there is a milestone from Ipsen when the Mesdopetam phase 2B study is concluded the end of this year. You said you couldn't answer that, but I've seen though you had the analysts here. Mm-hmm. Some of them say there's a milestone.
Yeah, they've got no more information than I can give anyone else. I've of course read the contract. But all I have said is it's a very standard contract, and all the contracts I've seen in my career, this is a very, very standard contract. There's nothing unusual about it whatsoever. And it's not heavily back-end weighted, which is the lookout, which means that they're always going to jam tomorrow, pay in the future. They're just going to pay as they go.
You have a question?
Sorry, you have a question, yes.
Very interesting. Thank you. I have two different kinds of questions. The first one is special. I have in my inner circle of friends, two have gotten Parkinson the last 2 years. I had lunch with one of them yesterday. So I asked myself, what does the science say about the reasons why you get Parkinson? Then I have a more investment. If you can tell us something more about life science companies, it's very important with the cash flow and balance sheet and competition and so forth. If you can say something about that as well, please.
Sure,
Thanks.
yes. Well, I'm also intrigued by the origins, what causes the disease. And I don't think we really know. It's a neurodegeneration like so many diseases. It wasn't until the 1850s or something that it was first defined and diagnosed. Maybe it was the 1750s, I can't remember. But it's not been in the medical literature for centuries. It's been recently defined. Now, the question which you don't know is whether or not that was because people started to live longer and therefore the symptoms of Parkinson's became apparent, or whether there was some other change. So when I was at university, there was some speculation that it may have been linked to the Industrial Revolution and some sort of pollutants, and somehow it's a long-term consequence of something to burning coal or something, but I just don't think we know. It's a neurodegeneration. It generally occurs later in life, but it can be diagnosed in earlier patients. So it'd be nice if we could find the true cause and then try and stop that. Similar to cancer, we don't really know what causes cancer. We keep looking around for these sort of oncodrivers, but we haven't really identified what causes cancer. We just know that when it's there, we need to address the symptoms or the immune response to it. And then you asked about the financial situation of the company. Well, we reported at Q2 323 million kroner, so we have a reasonably strong balance sheet at the moment. For the activities that we're doing at the stage that we're at. We have a lot of ongoing activities. So clearly, biotech companies always need cash. But having licensed the lead program to Ipsen, we have the possibility of a milestone at some point in the future if they decide to go forward. So therefore, we've got some opportunities there.
Another question from the audience.
Good that you are a pharmacologist. In my view, you should aim at putting, if we assume that pirepemat is also working, you should aim for putting the two, Mesdopetam and pirepemat, in one single tablet, once or twice daily, or preferably in a depot medicine. And then if you do that, you have some clutch on Ipsen to give you a decent deal on the pirepemat. Because from history we learned that if one succeeds in these one tablet simple dosage, it's commercially very appealing.
I know there's a number of products that have been combined through the decades, and a number that haven't been. It's an interesting strategy, but we've got no plans to progress like that. But certainly something to think about.
This will be the question, the last question,
okay.
And also what you get all the time for the Mesdopetam top line results end of this year. What is the minimum good number and what's a blockbuster great number? Now we're talking about good on time.
I know you are. Yes. As I mentioned in the presentation, interpreting clinical data is not as simple as a binary result. So we need to see a number. We need to see how statistically potent that is, the statistical relevance of that relative to the control group. And we also need to think about the patient population, the competitive landscape. Is it marketable? So the definition of a good clinical outcome has got multiple features to it. I think if it was sort of in the region that we saw in our phase 2A study, we'd be absolutely delighted. But I'm not saying that's what we're aiming for. I'm saying it's a more complicated decision to go forward. I mean, the clinical data needs to be statistically significant. That's the key thing. statistically significant against the control group. That's why it's randomized, placebo-controlled. And that would be the end point of the experiment. But does that mean it goes forward is a different sort of commercial interpretation. And so the binary number doesn't necessarily guide exclusively what that decision might be. Sorry, it's not an easy answer, but that's the way the business runs.
1 hour more would not be enough. I know I've seen a number of 2.8. Over 2 would be good. Over 3 would be great.
Sure, they'd all be great.
If you say so.
But of course, I'm not going to be pulled on one number because then held to that. But as I say, statistical significance over the control group and being relevant to the patients and the community, as we put in the slide deck. More than an hour would be clinically meaningful for the patients. And I think we can understand that. If you have 6 or 8 hours of good on, and then you have the dyskinesia, an extra hour, another 12% of the day when you can function without these troublesome tremors and instability, that will be a great benefit to you. 2 hours would be even better, 3 hours would be fantastic. So I think we can come to those conclusions ourselves.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, IRLAB.
Thank you.